Okay, so this is a video on section 4.3 covering the graphing of exponential functions. So we're going to do a bunch of examples of this and walk through the steps. So let's choose a function f of x equals 5x plus 2 minus 3. And what we want to do is we want to set up our graph. So we're going to use our toolkit function. So that means whatever number we have here to the exponent is what our toolkit function will be. So let's make our little chart. So I'm going to use -1, 0, 1, and 2, and we can use the same x values for every single graph that we do. And whatever number is here, we need to put that to the exponent. So the exponent of x. So 5 to -1, 5 to the 0, 5 to the 1, and 5 to the 2. So in my calculator, we calculate to see what that is. So 5 to the -1 is 1/5 or 0.2. 5 to the 0 is 1. 5 to the 1 is 5. And 5 to the 2 is 25. Okay, so we're ready to graph. So this is my toolkit function. So f of x is equal to 5x. And now I just graph my points. Now I do this in a different color. So now we've graphed it out and we draw our line through our points. So this is our initial graph. So now we want to draw the next graph. So what I look at is, okay, we want to see where our horizontal shift, if we have one, and where our vertical shift is. So in this case, we do have a horizontal shift because if there's a value next to my x, I know it's going to be horizontal. So we have an HT. And for the horizontal shift, the movement will always be the opposite of what is written. So opposite of what is written. So if it's +2, that means I'm going to go to the left 2 instead of going to the right 2. So let's draw that out. So we know we're going to move to the left 2. So that means if I look at let's say I'm looking at this point right here. I want to look at that one, and I'm going to move left 2. So I know it's on 0, 1, so that means my x is going to change, but my y is going to stay the same. So it's on 0, so we go -1, -2, and it's still on 1. So that's our new value. So now it's -2, 0. Now the other one, the y value is still going to stay the same, and we do the same thing as we did for the first point we did here, is we just move that over 2. So if it was on -1, now it's going to be on -3. Now what about the 1 and 5 here? Well, if it's on 1, it's going to go to 0, and then it's going to go to -1. So it's still going to stay on 5. So now it's on -1, since we moved over 2. Now what about the 225? Well, if it's on 2, we're just going to move over, so it'd be on 0. So 0, 25, this is -1, 5, and then so now we've done a horizontal shift, and I'm just going to label these with our color here. And then draw our line. It's not going to be exact, but we'll do the best we can. So now we've drawn the horizontal shifts. That means that we've shifted to the left 2. Now we need to do our vertical shift. So our vertical shift is a -3. Now whatever sign is corresponding with the vertical shift, you'll go with that sign. So if it's positive, you're going to go up. If it's negative, you're going to go down. So this one stays the same as its sign, not the opposite. So if we're going to go down 3, that means we're going to move all our points. We're going to move by the y versus the x. The horizontal shift is the x, and the vertical shift was the y. So let me draw that out. So now we're ready to graph this, and we have our full function written here now. So now we just have to do the vertical shift. So I'm looking back at my previous graph. I'm going to pick one of the points, and I'm going to move that one first. I'm going to choose, in this case, the -1 and 5 here. We'll start with that one. So if I'm going to shift down 3, so 5 minus 3 means we have 2, right? So it's going to go down to 2. So it's still going to be on -1, but now it's going to be on 2. So everything shifts down. So -1, 2. What about the next one? So let's do the one below that. We are on -2, 0. So if we're going down 2 from that, that means we're going to be on -2 on the y plane. So it'll be -2 and -2. Oh, that's easy. Now, what about the next one? Did I miss a point here? No. Let's do the one just below that. Well, we know it's on 0.2. So if we subtract that, it's going to be right next to it. So it's going to be still in the range of the other point. It's going to be slightly above and still on -3. I'm not going to really worry about the value here on this one. Just as long as it's in the right spot. And then the top one would be easier. So when you have a decimal, it's sometimes hard to find the exact value. That's why it's easier, I find, to use the whole values. Now, if we're on 25 in the y, we subtract 2 from that, we get 23. So now it's on 23 instead of 25. Let me change those to pink. And this one was -2, -2. Yeah, and then if I look at it, all we've done is just moved it down. So there we go. It's not exactly on the points, but that's okay. So now we have to see, okay, what's our asymptote? So our asymptote. So I'm going to draw a dotted line here. So wherever we've stopped, the bottom of the graph is here, and I kind of went over a little bit, but that's okay. So we stopped at y of -3, because you remember in our original equation we had a y of -3, so that's why our asymptote is actually the same thing. So initially you actually get the equation for your asymptote or asymptote. So y equals -3. And then the range and domain. So we know the domain for exponential functions is always all real numbers. So -infinity to +infinity. And the range is based off our asymptote. So we always write it from the bottom up. So the bottom is -3, and we write a bracket since we have a value. And then it forever goes up, so it's just going to be infinity. Okay, so this is one example. Now we're going to do one that has a reflection. So let's do f of x equals, let's try a smaller value so it's easy to graph. -2, let's do x minus 1 plus 3. Okay, so I want you to try graphing this and then come back and walk through the solution. I'll give you a minute. So pause the video and then come back. Okay, so welcome back. So we will first plot our points. So -1, 0, 1, 2. So now we take our base number, but not to the negative yet. We just want it in the positive form to the x. So we do 2 to the -1, 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, and 2 to the 2. To the -1 is 1/2, or 0.5. 2 to the 0 is 1. 2 to the 1 is 2. And 2 to the 2 we know is 4. So now let me graph this out. So our first graph is of f of x 2 to the x. I'm not going to do the reflection yet. I'm going to do that next. And I'm just going to copy paste our graph here so I can use it again. Okay. So then that means if we're not doing the reflection yet, our next one will be the reflection. And that's when we include the negative in the front. So if we're going to do those steps in order, we write our first, this is our function, original function, to the x. The next step is to do the negative, the reflection. The third step is to do the horizontal shift. And then the fourth step is to do the vertical shift. So that means we're going to have 4 total graphs. So if you're on the exam, a good thing to do is just number your steps so you can visually see, okay, what am I doing? Okay, so let me put our points on the graph here. Okay. So let's double check our points. So we had on -1, 0.5, good. Then we had 0, 1. And then we had 1, 2. And then 2, 4. So this is our first graph. Now we want to do the reflection. So reflection means that it's going to flip completely downwards across the x-axis. So, well, really it's the y-axis. So we're going to flip across the y. So all that happens is our y values will become negative. So the x values are what stay the same. So now it's -1, -0.5. Actually, I'm going to move that up a little bit because it's not really halfway. And then we have now 0, -1. And then 1, -2. And then the last one is 2, -4. So all we did is just flip it. So now we can draw our line. Okay, so now we did the reflection. So this is the reflection. So the next graph is going to be our first transformation, which will be the x minus 1. So again, the x movement, the horizontal shift, or translation, or transformation. I always say translation. Transformation is we're going to move the opposite of what's there. So if it's a -1, it's going to move a +1 from our points from the reflection. So we're going to go off of the reflection graph. So that means the horizontal shift or transformation. So move right 1. So I'm going to look at my points. I'm going to use the 0, -1 to start with. So 0, -1. If we're going to move that to the right 1, our 0 is going to change to 1. So now we'll be on 1, -1. Now what about the one above that? What would our value be? So if it was -1 in the x value, we move that over 1. So now it's going to be 0, -0.5. So we'll just make it right about here. What about 1, -2? So if we're on 1, move over 1, now it's going to be on 2. So x value of 2 and a y value of -2. And then what about the last one? So if we're on 2, we move over 1, now it's going to be 3. And a y value of -4, so that doesn't change. So now we've done our horizontal shift, we draw our line. Now we need to do the last one. So this is going to be our complete. So this was the first transformation. Now we need the second transformation. And as our last final step of the function. So it's +3. So that means, okay, so if we go to our original function, we have +3, so that will be our fourth step, and that is our vertical translation. So whatever sign is next to the vertical transformation will be that sign. So if it's +3, we're going to go up 3. So VT up 3. Okay, so let's finish this last graph. So I'm going to pause it and I'm going to fill it all in for you guys. So now I've graphed the final graph for you guys. So this will be our final. And now we need to find out, okay, what is my asymptote? Okay, so if it's +3, and I can actually see this right here, I can see that my asymptote is for sure +3. So great, now we have our equation. So our equation of asymptote is 3. And then what about our domain? We know our domain is all real numbers for exponential. And our range is based on our asymptote. Now, if we're in a reflection, we want to write from the bottom up. So since we're starting from the bottom and we're going from -infinity, that'll be our first thing we write. And we stop at 3. So this is how you graph exponential functions. Now you can have a graph, let's say they don't have a horizontal shift at all. So let's say if it was -2x plus 3, then you would just do your initial function, the toolkit function, you would do the reflection, and then the vertical transformation. You wouldn't have a horizontal shift. So for example, if it was like this, you would not have a horizontal shift. So no horizontal. Now let's say if it was just like this, then you'd only have no vertical, yes, horizontal. So So something to keep in mind. If you weren't given a horizontal shift, then you wouldn't have to graph that. So this is exponential functions.